Yes, Samira is still OP, but there is more to this patch than just Samira, I promise. And hey, she's banned like 75% of the time anyway, so it's probably best to focus on all the other champions. What is going on, summoners? My name is Matt, and I'll be your host for this mid-patch update. As always, we're going to be following up on all the changes and making any necessary adjustments to the tier lists we provided you at the beginning of the patch. If you're trying to climb, you'll want to stay tuned because we're providing you guys with tier lists for all 5 roles. Another thing you can do if you're trying to climb is to go to ProGuides.com, where we've got incredible coaches as well as a ton of classes for you guys aimed at helping you level up your gameplay. Make sure to check that out, and before we start this video, do me a quick favor and answer our question of the day. What are your thoughts on smurfing? Is it bad, is it good, or is it somewhere in between? Tell me everything you think about it. Here's what I think. To be honest, I think there's a middle line to be drawn here. Smurfing can be good, but it can also be bad. Some players have ranked anxiety, and I can relate because I used to struggle with this all the time. Having an extra account is a great way to get around this because you can always play on the account that's lower ranked and feel like there's so much less to lose. However, there are times where players are just smurfing to boost their own egos and playing against people who are, of course, worse than them. That just ruins the game for everyone, and I know a lot of you guys can probably relate. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below because I'd love to read them. With that said, let's hop into the video. Let's start off by following up on our one change to the top lane. Camille was nerfed this patch, and the results are as we would have expected. Her win rate has dropped an identical amount in both high and low elo. The amount isn't by much either, she's dropped roughly 0.33% for most ranks. Her attack speed bonus on her E was reduced in the late game, but this hasn't amounted to very much of a difference in her overall gameplay. She's still a strong champion for the entirety of the game, and it's only in some scenarios where the loss of attack speed will actually be noticeable. For the majority of the game, however, Camille feels roughly the same, and we're happy with her current placement. In terms of changes to the tiers, we do have a couple we want to take note of. We've gone and actually moved Malphite into the S tier as well. That's right, we've got a tanky boy up in the S tier once again. While Maokai was there not too long ago, a nerf unfortunately forced him out of the S tier, but Malphite is up and ready to take it upon himself to make sure that the terror of a potential tank meta is always looming. Malphite has been finding a great deal of success across all ranks, and a big reason behind it is just how impactful his ultimate can be. He's literally a press R to win champion. His backline access as well as initiation is absolutely insane. And what's even better is that he can do pretty well in his 1v1s against a ton of other top laners. With his affinity toward armor, he has no problem just building armor and countering pretty much any auto attack or physical damage based champion as a result. The last change we've made in the top lane is moving Irelia down to the B tier. While she's a potent champion who finds some success in high elo, we suggest other champions for low to mid elo players. There are far too many variables to account for when playing Irelia, and you can honestly get so much more while working less if you pick someone like Garen or even Jax. Thus, our OP pick for the top lane is still Darius. One day, boys, one day. Following up in the S tier are Fiora, Garen, Jax, Urgot, Singed, Alawi, Shen, and Malphite. That's all for the top lane, so let's head into the jungle next. We saw a ridiculous number of jungle changes, so let's follow up on those now. Overall, we're quite happy with the adjustments we made at the beginning of the patch. Hecarim got nerfed, but he's still doing great. He commands a ton of bans, especially in high elo. However, he's not a pick that's exclusively strong in those brackets. Hecarim sits comfortably around a 51.5% win rate, while also eating up bans left and right with a 20% ban rate. As the 4th most played jungler this patch, it's almost as if the nerfs haven't even touched him. We did move Hecarim out of the OP tier recently as a result, but we still think he's an amazing pick, and he'll hold his S tier placement for now. Graves is in a slightly different situation, however. Players are acting as if he wasn't nerfed. He's still very popular and is also banned a lot, but his win rates have been falling off. As he's squishier this patch, there's a lot more risks you have to take while playing him now. and thus it's only natural that his win rate would drop accordingly. The A tier seems like a decent place to put him for this patch as well. One big shift we have to make is with Nidalee. Across all ranks, her current win rate sits around 45%. This is terribly low, and while she's actually had similar numbers in previous patches, her dominance in high elo still merited her as a higher tier pick. While Nidalee remains a passable pick for high elo, the amount of skill and practice required to play her successfully now don't seem justifiable for the majority of players. You have to work so hard, and even the slightest mistakes, whether your own or your team's, can honestly just cost you the game. Nidalee relies on pushing leads and making sure her enemies have absolutely no breathing room. Letting them off the hook for even a moment can cost you the game, and a single lost skirmish can honestly put you too far behind to come back. The circumstances were similar in previous patches, but with the loss of some attack damage, Nidalee's jungle clear is a bit slower than before, and she's also not as strong in early game skirmishes. We've moved Nidalee down to the C tier as a result. For the most dedicated players, especially elite ones, Nidalee could still be a great pick in the right situations, but overall, it might be best for most players to pick someone else. Next up is Trundle. Outside of high elo, Trundle is actually a pretty great pick after the buffs that he received this patch. When you're playing against a tank jungler, you can consider Trundle an S or a high A tier pick. Overall, we'll leave him as a B tier pick because he can thrive in the right circumstances. The lowered cooldown on his W has left his mid to late game a bit stronger than before. In low elo, where games tend to go much longer, players are able to utilize the longer uptime on his W to strong arm fights and come out on top. Lee Sin was also buffed this patch, and we're also happy keeping him where he is right now. While Lee Sin may be stronger than he was before and his run rates have gone up, the changes haven't really been significant enough for him to move up a whole tier. That's all there is to it for him. He received a little bit more AD per level and scales a bit better than before, but not much has really changed for him. Udyr is the final change we'll follow up on. His Phoenix stance was buffed this patch, and the result has been underwhelming once again. This was a big buff, but it's failed to produce noticeable results for him. One reason for this is that most players still prefer to play Tiger Stance Udyr. If they were to give Phoenix Stance Udyr a chance, we might see his win rates climb a bit as it was buffed extremely hard this patch. We'll leave Udyr at the bottom of the A tier for now, as we expect some optimizations to come in the near future. Will someone find the right build on him? Or will next season's item rework beat them to it? Only time will tell. The other change we've made to the tier list this patch is that we've moved Fiddlesticks up into the OP tier. With all the various shifts and balance changes, it just seems like Fiddlesticks has flown through the radar and crowned himself as the spooky king of the jungle. He sports a 53% win rate in Platinum and higher, and his overall win rate isn't that much lower. With less priority on vision control in solo queue, Fiddlesticks has an easier time catching opponents off guard and hard carrying games with well-placed ultimates. His damage output is quite high, and even if he's not the tankiest, his ability to drain enemies and cast Zhonya's Hourglass to stall for time make him a great distraction for his allies. One change we didn't make, but want you guys to be aware of, is Skarner. He sports a 53% win rate at the moment, but because of his very low play rate, we're going to give it some more time before deciding if we want to push him up to the A tier. This could just be a lucky patch for Skarner players, and we need a bigger sample size of games to really know if he's that strong or not. One thing is for certain though, he's definitely a good pick. So if you're looking for someone new to try, it definitely can't hurt to pick him up. Our OP picks for this patch are now Rammus and Fiddlesticks, followed up by Hecarim, Evelynn, Kha'Zix, Nunu, Rek'Sai, Vi, Elise, and Kayn in the S tier. That's a wrap for the jungle, so let's hop into the mid lane next. This patch saw a single mid lane change with a buff to Corki. The ratio on his Q was increased by a bit this patch, but with that being the only real change, we haven't seen very many shifts in the mid lane meta. Corki is unfortunately still a C tier pick, especially considering that he needs a ton of time to get rolling. While lower elo games do drag out pretty regularly, you give up a little bit too much of your agency in the very early game by locking him in. In very slow games, you'll be able to scale up and become an absolute monster, but not every game is going to allow you to hit that point. That said, we have made a couple of adjustments to the top of our tier list. Kassadin's nerf last patch has been a miracle for Fizz enthusiasts. His win rate has creeped up just a little bit this patch, as he's got a little bit less to worry about. Fizz's chaotic playstyle is great for solo queue. He can burst down targets with ease, and his shark can cause a ton of disorganization and confusion in low elo. On top of this, Fizz's tricky mobility makes him a great pick in high elo as well, where safety is a pretty big priority for players. We've switched Fizz and Dion's places this time around, and thus we've got Fizz as our OP pick this patch, followed by Yone, Vladimir, Zed, Talon, Echo, Diana, Annie, Nocturne, and Yasuo. That covers the mid lane, so let's run through the bottom lane next. We know you guys know this, but yes, Samira is still OP. While she did get nerfed this patch, our analysts already knew that this nerf wouldn't be enough to make an impact on her absurd ban rate. Her win rate has dropped just a little bit, but this is because players are getting better at her. The champion is weaker than before, but the players behind the screen have been slowly getting the practice they need for optimal gameplay. Samira's E was put on a longer cooldown this patch, and the attack speed also decreased. But in a similar fashion to Camille, the loss of attack speed isn't noticeable in a lot of situations. Her E's cooldown being increased was a big nerf, but the fact that she can reset it makes any nerf to it a little bit less effective. Aphelios was also buffed, and his overall win rate went up by about 0.25%. The increased power on all of his ultimates was definitely a nice little touch-up, but he'll need a bit more to really start picking up traction in solo queue again. He's a pick with tons of potential, and his win rates aren't low enough for us to count him out. Thus, we're okay leaving him in the A tier for now. Our tier list for the bottom lane remains unchanged from our initial patch rundown. To quickly run through the top of our list, we've got Samira as our OP pick, followed by Caitlyn, Ashe, Jhin, Draven, Ezreal, the Lux and Sona duo, Misfortune, and Vayne in our S tier. Samira's 75% ban rate is still persistent, so yes, she is undoubtedly a menace that players hate dealing with. Finally, let's run through the supports. There were 2 support changes this patch. First up was to Pantheon. Like our analysts thought, support Pantheon is a bit weaker than before. He still works, and if you like playing him, there's nothing wrong with choosing him. Pantheon has his strengths, but simply deals less damage now unless he builds enough AD to compensate. His placement in the B tier seems adequate for the majority of players. Karma's buffs weren't enough to move her up the tier list, just like our analysts thought as well. While her mantra is more accessible than before, she's still struggling to find success in most games. Compared to other enchanters, you have to put in a lot more work with her to find similar results, so we're going to leave her in the C tier for now. We've been keeping our eyes peeled for picks and have a change to our list for you guys to be aware of. Swain has been an absolute monster in low to mid elo, and a pretty good one in high elo as well. Considering that he's finding success for the majority of players, we felt that it was alright for us to place him in the S tier. Swain's overall win rate falls just short of 53%, and we're confident that his mixture of high damage as well as utility make him a solid hybrid for players looking to support their teammates while also making sure they have the ability to carry them as well. On the other hand, we've noticed that Senna has been slowly falling off. We've moved her down to the A tier because she still feels pretty good, but is simply not strong enough to be in the S tier right now. And so, our S tier supports for this patch are Lulu, Blitz, Soraka, Bard, Morgana, Nami, Janna, Leona, Alistar, Lux, and Swain. With all that covered, we'll wrap up our mid-patch update for patch 10.21. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and we hope you found it helpful. Leave any thoughts and comments you have for us, because we want to continue improving our content and also know what you guys think of the game right now. Make sure you also check out ProGuides.com if you're trying to make that end of the season push, because we've got tons of resources there for you. Until next time, best of luck on the Rift, Summoners.